the MSPs who are smart about embracing AI and looking at ways to incorporate AI in their service delivery in a way that is working hand in hand with the humans in their companies, they're going to be much more successful than if they just try to use AI as a way to not have to have people.
Hey guys, Damien Stevens, host of MSP Mindset, founder and CEO of Servacity. Today I'm blessed to spend time with Luis Alvarez. Now his philosophy is you need to treat agents as coworkers, not tools. That really aligns with my philosophy and what I call compounding teams. We dig deep into what this means from a culture perspective and agentic AI perspective, and what this means for your clients. If you'd like to learn more of how to apply this to your MSP and be on the cutting edge, don't miss out on my conversation with Luis today. So I want to get right to the heart of something you said that is, it's newer for most people. And you guys are doing some interesting things with AI and agentic AI. But you mentioned you have a specific tool, and I think you even had an interesting story around who you're interviewing now and treating this particular agent as a coworker and not a tool. So tell me a little bit about that mindset.
Yeah, so I was I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to visit with Microsoft in Ingram Micro in Atlanta, and one of the things that the 2-day conference was about was, needless to say, this is Microsoft, so it was about Copilot and their AI and agentic AI vision of the future. And one of the things that they emphasize is that we are going to see agents in the future interacting with our humans in a peer-to-peer way. And it's important for our humans, our technicians, the engineers that we work with, our customers, our clients, to start thinking of agents not as tools or things to be used, but as people, as coworkers that they can interact with in a very, collaborative way. And it really struck a note for me because to that point, I've interacted with Copilot on a daily basis. I can't live without it, right? It's become integral to my ability to do the things that I do as a leader. But I've not really seen it, or I've tried to see it as kind of a robot assistant. But now I'm treating it much more like I would treat anybody else that it works for me.
So help me understand that a little more, because I think most of us are still chatting with AI. And if you're into that era, the agentic era and actually handing off work and things, it's very different. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I'll give you a practical example. We have an AI tool that we use called by Thread that helps us help our clients directly. And it's an agentic AI engine that we call Fred. Or, nice play on words. My wife actually came up with that, not me. Nice. And so with Fred, after this session, I took our team, I got our team together and I said, hey, look, we need to start interacting with Fred in a very different way. Before we were using it as a chat, right? So let's say I'm in a ticket that I'm working on, and I can say, look up any other instances of this client, this particular user at this client having this problem, and what was the resolution? And let's say it responds incorrectly. Well, natural human inclination when you're using a tool is to say, well, I'm going to go find out myself, right? So you just kind of ignore the tool, you go figure it out. But I said, no, you need to help Fred get better. So say, hey, no, Fred, that's not what I was asking for. I think you misunderstood, or let me clarify, and do what you would do with any other coworker. If you asked them to do something and they made a mistake and gave you the wrong information, you wouldn't just brush them off or ignore them. You would say, no, that's not what I asked for. Here's what I'm looking for. Go get it. Yeah. And so now we're trying to do that more interactively across the board. And the hope is that Fred becomes better at helping us help our clients. because it knows, it gets syntax better, and it gets trained better over time. And the other thing that we're doing is, I said, another way that we can help Fred is if we know certain things that we want to share with it, let's share those things. There's a way that you can create notes that are hidden from the client but are helpful to the AI, where you can say, if this person ever calls, make sure that the first technician that works with her is Sean, because she loves Sean and she, works best with Sean if Sean's available. Well, the AI can take that information, and when when it tries to assign a ticket, it can assign it to Sean because it knows about that. So the same sort of things that you would share with coworkers, whether it's like in passing or in a debrief after a project or something, do the same thing with Fred. And now I'm talking to our clients about their use of AI and agents and how they can really train these agents. One of the things that we did was we took our core values, which is something that we train all of our employees on, and we fed them to Fred. And we said, Fred, here's our core values. Memorize them, embrace them. And we haven't seen direct results yet from that, but I expect that over time we will.
I get the pleasure to be in build sessions with MSPs just like you, building real things with AI. And the number one friction point, the number one blocker is I can't connect to all the systems. In fact, my vendor makes an MCP server or a connector or whatever they call it, yet it's read-only. Another one tried it and it limited them to 100 records. How are you going to search for all the tickets when you can only get to 100? If you're tired of vendor connectors and MCP servers holding your business back, check out the MSP Skills repo. The link is below. It's got over 50 different MCP servers, skills, and connectors that you can use to connect your entire stack to the agentic AI of your choice. Now, why do you care? The reason is you can now go through and say, find all the unused licenses that I'm paying for that I shouldn't be. Would you like it to go through and prep across all your different tools for that QBR? That thing that took you hours to prepare for one client is now one sentence. So if you want to make sure you're getting the value out of AI, you've got to connect it to your real world business systems. And there is no better place than the MSP Skills repo. Check it out on the link below. And if you have questions or if you just want to join, learn more, come to one of the build sessions. You'll see us putting it into action. Is this a pretty recent switch to treating AI as a coworker?
Yeah. I mean, before, I think we all fall into the habit of, when AI was a novelty, it was fun to use. Then we really started to replace our traditional way of interacting with the internet, with search, for example, by using, whatever your AI engine or chatbot of choice. So we've made that, that evolutionary step, if you will. But now I think we need to transcend that, especially as this whole concept of, agents starts to really take off. And we're going to see more and more of it, not just from Microsoft, but you're going to see more of it from all of the ecosystem that's out there, whether it's, SAP or, ConnectWise or whatever tools you want to use. They're going to embrace agentic AI as I call it, a force multiplier, right? It's to get us to be able to be the best version of ourselves, but we can't treat it like we do a tool. We need to treat it like it is there to help us do our job better, and we want to make it better. And so the more interactive that we can be, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, it's a big mindset shift to correct. Mm-hmm. I think it a little more like onboarding a junior person.
Yeah.
You may need to be more patient. You may need to allow for some time to come up to speed. What's the team's reaction? I know it seems like people adopt this at differing paces.
Yeah, so that's not everybody's homogenous, right? So I wish I could say everybody's embraced it and is doing it. There are people that are very forward thinking and are, really embracing it. They tinker with it outside of the office. So for them, this is an opportunity to tinker with it inside the office. I was interviewing recently a potential new technician, and I asked her about her use of AI and how she was using AI in her current job, which is at another MSP. And she said, well, we don't really use it that much, but at home, and she was describing how she uses it. And I said, well, what do you think of the idea of treating an AI as a coworker? Somebody, because I was telling her about how we use Fred, and she was enthusiastic. She was like, man, that's a really different way of thinking about AI. And I think it makes sense because they do take on something of a personality, especially as these AI agents now have a bigger repository of memory, so they can remember a lot more about you, about the way you interact, about your company. So they you should use that to your advantage, so that you're not constantly having to retrain it and give it memories that are valuable that it can use to help you and help your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of impact do you think this is going to be to you or your company, going from kind of chatting with AI to treating it like a coworker?
What I see is that it's going to make the employees, the human employees, much better at their jobs when they learn to trust AI more. Right? There's I think because it's moving so fast. We've all experienced hallucinations. We've all experienced AI making mistakes. But what I try to tell people is that just because it's going to make a mistake doesn't mean that you can't correct it and you can't help it get better. But you have to be very interactive, and you have to not just dismiss it like just turn off the tool. Okay, well, you're not doing what I want, so I'm going to go do something. I'm going to use something else. You have to treat it like you would another human being and train it to be better at its job. And I think that in and of itself will also train us to be better at our jobs. Because I truly believe that, when you first, especially in a technical role like we have at our company, you get better by helping other people get better. Because you become, the trainer to pass along knowledge, to pass along capability. There's nothing to be gained by holding that to yourself, especially if you work in a group setting. So doing the same thing with an AI agent or multiple AI agents is really going to improve the outcomes that we provide to our clients, which is really ultimately what we're trying to do, is give them better outcomes, whether that's through smarter people who are learning more and getting more educated or more knowledgeable, or using AI agents to help us do a better job of supporting them.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point. I mean, what you said for some reason triggered, like, I remember the early days of PCs, and especially the early days of Windows were not known for stability.
Mm-hmm.
And if you compared that to your word processor or typewriter, the typewriter didn't crash. And sometimes your system did. But, we tolerated all of that. We learned how to work differently and work with it as it matured. And I think we're, in the very early innings, I think we're seeing similar things, right? Where we need to work with this. We need to give it time to correct it. Because clearly if you said, I'm not going to move from a word processor or a typewriter to, even just using WordPerfect or Word or whatever, back in the day, that would have been a mistake, right? That you need so much power.
If we want these tools to be better at helping our clients, then we have to go the extra mile to treat them like we would any coworker. And you mentioned onboarding, and that was one of the things that Microsoft said that they were doing now with their agents, is that they're going through this onboarding process like you would with any other human being, to get them knowledgeable about, the vision, the mission, the core values, and all of the other things that make Microsoft who they are, so that when these agents interact with human beings, they feel like they're talking to a person. They don't feel like they're talking to a machine who's just regurgitating things. And that's where I think the in our industry, the MSPs who are smart about embracing AI and looking at ways to incorporate AI in their service delivery in a way that is, working hand in hand with the humans in their companies, they're going to be much more successful than if they just, try to use AI as just a way to not have to have people, right? It's like I've heard recently a lot of talk about, native AI MSPs. These are, MSPs that are founded from the ground up with AI at their core. And that's a great concept as long as they're married to good technicians or good engineers that really have what the client is expecting is, the ability to deliver really good outcomes.
Yeah. You mentioned, speaking with AI, I think you guys are ahead of a lot. I think you have this similar agent or some version of Fred that actually either dispatches or picks up and talks to people. Is that right?
Yeah. So that was something that we recently, we started with Fred, and with the company Thread, they have the ability to create a chatbot within Microsoft Teams. So we deployed that across all of our clients. And at first, there was some reluctance to use it, right? Because they were like, well, I can just email you guys, or I can, pick up the phone and call. And we said, yeah, absolutely. But chat gives you a quick way to ask for help and maybe resolve a problem. And, we started to see an uptick in that interaction now happening more and more with clients, and especially over the last 3 or 4 months. And we think it's because people are starting to accept that AI is reliable and it's good at responding really quickly, right? So before, somebody would email us at our help email, and then it might be, 15, 20, 30 minutes, if not an hour before we responded, depending on the severity of the issue. Mm-hmm. And by then they moved on, right? Or whatever concern they had, they're now like, oh, I'm doing something else. I don't have time to work with you right now. But if I can put a query into Teams and immediately get a response, or at least start the discovery process, then I'm going to get, to a solution faster. So that started to work really well. And so we said, okay, I think we're ready for the next step in this. And that's using voice AI to augment our dispatchers. So, we have like a lot of MSPs, people call in. We like to pick up the phone. We don't like them to roll the voicemail. We like to be able to have people pick up the line and start helping right away. But sometimes that means you have a call queue, people waiting in the queue for a period of time. So what we've done now is at about the 5-minute point, the AI, Fred, just a voice version of him, will pick up the call and say, hey, I'm Fred, ATG's AI assistant. Calls are backed up right now. Can I help you with anything, or do you want me to put you back in the queue so that you can talk to a technician? At first, people were like, put me back in the queue. They don't want to deal with the AI. Right. But now they're more comfortable with actually leaving, trying to get an answer to their, hey, I'm calling to see if Sean has had a chance to work on my ticket. And it'll ask a few questions, figure out what the ticket is, look at the ticket and say, yes, Sean's working on it, or it's, Sean's going to get to it later this afternoon. It's on the schedule. Do you want me to let him know that you called? And it'll say yes. And so it'll make a note in that ticket that client called Sean, checking in on the ticket. So it speeds things up, and people are getting more comfortable, interacting with it. One feedback, though, that we have gotten is they said, look, the reason we want to work with you guys and we love working with you guys is because your technicians pick up the phone. The moment that you get rid of them and it's only AI, we may have to reconsider. So even for people who've been with us a while, there's a tolerance of AI as a useful addition to what we do, but it's not going to replace what we do, at least not for the clients that we have.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty early. Like a lot of people are adopting internally. A few people are doing some projects, but to have it embedded in their teams, the clients, or, call queues, that's, you're ahead of a lot. So I'm curious, if your team is not on the same page, I'm sure your client base is even more dispersed and more, you know, on all sorts of spectrums. What kind of reactions have you seen to the use of whether it's the voice or the Teams or the other? Because it seems like some people love, some people hate, some people are, you know, on a spectrum in between.
Yeah, I will say that the bulk of our clients interact with the AI via email, because we also use it as a tool. When they initially send in a request, the AI will respond. We actually responded right away, but we decided that people were freaking out because of that. So now we tell it to delay about 30 seconds. And so it gets the email, it then responds in about 30 seconds, and it says, hey, you send an email saying that you're having a problem with a monitor. Can you describe it a little bit more? Because usually, people aren't great at sending help tickets, describing in specifics. So you go through this discovery process that the AI does for the technician before it assigns that ticket to a technician. Or sometimes we're about, I think, at 3 or 4% now of the AI actually resolving the issue. Being able to give the client enough information that they are like, oh, okay, great. Yeah, that solved it. Or sometimes it's as easy as, have you turned it off and back on, which is the number one thing we tell people to do. Yeah. And they do that and they say, yeah, that solved the problem. Thank you. Appreciate it. And so that's the end of that. But if that person who sent that help request needed to wait 20 or 30 minutes to get a problem resolved, then we're not doing a good service for that client. But there are others that do not like the AI at all. They, when the AI responds and says, hey, I'm trying to clarify your issue, crickets, they won't respond at all. And so that gets assigned to a technician who then makes a phone call and tries to get the client on the line to do that discovery process on their own. But I will say that because AI is becoming so prevalent throughout our day, everything that we do, whether it's going on Amazon and ordering something and having their AI pop up, now smartly called Alexa, pops up and tries to help. And so you can go in there and say, yeah, I ordered last year. I remember ordering these batteries. Can you look it up and tell me what they were? And it does it, rather than you going into your orders and searching and trying to figure out when you ordered them. Easy peasy. So we're getting comfortable with that. And that comfort level is now bleeding over into our interactions with our clients, where they're getting more comfortable with AI. They're using it now. With AI, much like when cybersecurity was first a thing, right? Those of us in the industry spent a long time educating clients on the importance of cybersecurity, the importance of good cyber hygiene. They weren't necessarily ready to pull the trigger immediately to make the investments they needed to invest. Thank God for insurance companies who forced them to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And then we just became, the messenger. Don't kill us. We're just telling you need to do MFA because you want this cyber insurance policy. Right. But we spent the last couple of years with AI kind of talking about what they should be aware of. Hey, you need to implement an AI, use policy right away. Even if you're not going to implement AI right away, you still want to be able to tell your employees what's allowed and what's not allowed, so that they don't make the mistake of doing something, ignorantly, and then you have to pay the price. Or conversely, you lay the policy out there, and if they don't follow it, at least you have a way to have some consequences. Because if you don't have a policy and they do something you don't like, there's nothing you can do about it other than after the fact. Right. And so that, those conversations started early on, but they was always followed by, well, but we're never going to use it. We're never going to have it here. Now that's changed because they recognize that their employees are using AI at home, right? They're going on ChatGPT at night and doing all the things that you told them they couldn't do in the office. So you might as well pay for, a license of a professional version of these agents so that they can use it in a protected way that doesn't compromise or potentially compromise, corporate data or PII.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, right, you're versed in compliance and cybersecurity. How have you gone about choosing, and how do you figure out, are we adopting fast enough? Are we too far on the bleeding edge? How do you know? Is that a cultural thing? Is there a small group that spearheads that? I'm curious how you attack that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in our company, I've always been, in my mind anyway, I'm responsible for really looking out beyond the horizon and looking at, what are the things that we need to be investing in and getting smarter on to help our clients. What are the things that they're going to want to know from us or get from us, and how do we get that knowledge? So we were very early adopters of cloud-based services back when Microsoft came up with the oh so greatly named Business Productivity Online Suite, or BPOS. We told our clients, hey, this is the future. The days of on-prem Exchange servers are numbered, and we are going to be moving you to the cloud. And there was a lot of reluctance, right? Because people were concerned about data protection, and they were concerned about who had access to their emails, and then later their SharePoint sites and things like that. And we impressed upon them that Microsoft, I think, is a little bit better about cybersecurity than you are. So I would trust them and their data centers more than I would trust the way that that you manage your email server. We've gradually over the last, how many decade or so, migrated all of our clients off into the cloud. I think we have one Exchange server that's still, in a data center someplace for one of our clients because they have a very special need, and so they can't move to the cloud just yet. But eventually they will. And more of our companies that we do business with, they don't have servers. They don't have the traditional, internal Active Directory environment. They're completely all cloud-based. And, the same thing happened with cybersecurity. We started to see, hey, we need to get smart about this because the threats are growing, especially after, ransomware started to become much more prevalent. We said we need to have better tools, better ways of communicating with clients. And so we needed to find those tools, and we needed to constantly evaluate tools. We have an internal process where every year we look at our entire stack and we say, are we using the right tools? Are we using the right stack? Is there something in here that we can consolidate? Because that's the other thing, there's this tool spread, as that happens as you kind of layer things on top of each other.
Yeah.
And eventually it gets a little, cumbersome to manage. And so if we can reduce the number of vendors that we use by consolidating some of those tools, then we do. But you have to be constantly evaluating them. You just can't one and done type stuff. And the same thing with AI. I mean, when we first started using AI, we brought in one vendor that really helped. They were early to the AI push, but within a year, we just kind of topped out of that particular tool that we were using. It wasn't adding enough value to justify the cost. And so we said, okay, well, we're done with that, but what's next? And so we kept our eye out for what's next.
I want to stop you there for a second because the pace has changed, right? It used to be tools were adopted for much longer. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious because it sounds like you found some value. Mm-hmm. And then a year later, the value moved or something. Did you get from chatting with it and treating it like a coworker? Was that it? Was it something else that you said this is not the right fit anymore?
Yeah, I think what it was early on, it delivered a lot of value because of the way that it surfaced data from our PSA. But then we learned that really was helpful for the newer members of our team, and the people, the more seasoned techs that we had really didn't make use of it because they were like, well, it didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. So, it became a thing like, okay, well, we need it for those, maybe one or two techs that we hire a year. They might benefit something from it, but the rest of the guys within, a year being here, they're like, yeah, it doesn't give me anything. And so we said, okay, well, that's not worth the investment. Let's keep on looking for something else. And I think that that's the challenge for a lot of these vendors, is that they constantly have to be innovating, because if they're not, then somebody else is going to do something better, and we need to pivot to that. So now, there's a lot of the PSA providers. They're trying to incorporate AI directly into their products, so that their customers like us don't go out and look for potentially the product that's going to replace theirs, and that's smart. But I think that as a leader in my organization, my job is to keep an eye out for what that next big thing, that better mousetrap, and how it can help us do a better job of helping our clients. And right now, I think with Fred, I think the company Thread is doing a really good job of innovating and providing additional value to their product. And I think if you're in the AI space, that's what you have to do. And you can't just sit back and say, well, we do this one thing and we do it really well, and that's all we're ever going to do, because somebody new is going to come in and say, well, we do that and these other 2 other things, or these other 10 other things, and right. You're going to say, well, if I'm going to spend that much money, I might as well get more stuff for it than I'm getting now.
Given the pace of change is accelerating and continues to be so, it seems, how do you get your arms around, like, is this a normal once a year vendor selection? Do you look at building versus buying? Like, how do you get your arms around this?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We played with building our own agents, and we have some really smart people, and they built some specific use agents for our tool set that helps our team. And it's great to see them do that, right? Because it's like, hey, here's this thing that works specifically for us because of all the tools that we have that we can interact with. I see that happening more and more as the open claw type of AI engine becomes available more. Like Microsoft has their Scout product, which is essentially the same thing as OpenClaw that's coming out. But theirs is going to be more commercially based, so it's going to interface with applications that a typical business uses on a day-to-day basis, to be able to aggregate information from a bunch of different sources and then surface that in plain language conversations. Mm-hmm. That's going to be great. We're going to be at the forefront of that. We're going to help our clients build those automation and build that level of AI value into their organization. And we're already starting to do that a little bit with Microsoft M365 Copilot, in helping our clients use agents from within Copilot to help their business. Like, what are the top 3 pain points that you have, and how can we use AI to address those pain points? And you'd be surprised at how interactive that conversation can become when you're sitting down with your client. And they're like, the thing that I hate the most is our expense reports. They're manual. I have all these Excel spreadsheets. I have all these receipts that then I have to scan. Is there a better way to do this? And so you sit down with them, and suddenly you're now in a very creative, value-based conversation, that the outcome is something that for them is going to solve a lot of problems. And you have the capability of helping, because now you have these, agentic AI tools that you can use to create a solution that before you couldn't.
Yeah. How did you start down this journey? I mean, I know we all kind of started chatting with it, but did you go and find, an agent or a way to save yourself time, and then later, kind of after proving it out, bring it to the team and say, let's save the team time? Or how did that happen?
So for me, I had the epiphany, like many of us did, the first time that I used ChatGPT, back when it first came out almost 3 years ago. And you're like, oh my God, this is so cool. and this is so, at first you kind of treated it like a glorified search engine.
Yeah.
But then as you started learning its capabilities and as it got better, you saw that it could really be helpful in many ways. And so when Copilot, because we're a Microsoft shop, when they made Copilot available, we subscribed to it. And for a select group of people within the organization that I thought it would add value for. And they were reluctant to use it because they're like, I don't know. I don't know how this is going to help me. But then we made it a point in our team meetings to use examples. Okay, so who's developed something? How have you used Copilot this week differently than last week? And people started to see it's capable of creating really good, social media campaigns by just feeding it the right information. So our marketing people were like really happy that now they didn't have to come to me to get the content that they needed to use for a social media campaign around, us providing cybersecurity services for healthcare providers. They can go in and say, okay, let's create this thing. And then internally, I started using it, for example, to review documents that I got from vendors, maybe agreements or terms and conditions, and I would feed it into Copilot and say, "Hey, knowing us like you do, read this like you're my in-staff legal counsel, and tell me what I should be concerned about." And it surfaces all sorts of things that are like, oh, I did not know that was in there. None of us read these T's and C's, but having somebody that does and be able to look out for your best interest is actually kind of a cool thing. And so I started using it for that, and I started using it to build, contracts and agreements. And I built an agent so that our salespeople, when they have a new prospect and they want to put together an agreement, rather than doing it through our spreadsheet and doing those kind of calculations, they can just tell it what all the parameters are of the client that we base our agreements on, and it would come up with an agreement for them. And they're like, wow, this is really cool. So those are the sorts of things that you have to kind of show people, and then they start getting creative about using it themselves and saying, oh, I can use it for this, or I can use it for that. My controller, who, is very old school. She's, done things the old fashioned way. She's a very spreadsheet focused person, said she'd never use Copilot. But now not a day goes by that she doesn't feed it all sorts of information and ask for it to do analysis, or to tell her, hey, what are the concerns that I should have about, the AR this month, those sorts of things.
I love that. I want to go to something you shared before about you're now doing things that just weren't really feasible. People didn't have time to do manually. Can you share some examples?
Yeah, just the documentation alone that we would, in a perfect world, we would have very up-to-date, current documentation on all of our client systems and processes and procedures and so on and so forth, onboarding, those sorts of things. There's just not enough hours. I don't have enough technicians. I couldn't afford to hire all the technicians that I would need to do that. But now we have the ability, we use IT Glue as our document repository, and it's linked into Thread. So now when our techs update, when they get new information that they want to update some document or some process, it's super easy to do. They can just tell the AI, hey, go update the process with this new way of doing things, and off it goes. And you can take one person and now have them do a bunch more work because they have an assistant that they can leverage to do a lot of the detail work, and at least, at the worst case, ask them questions like, okay, well, how, in this encryption policy, you say this in one part of the policy, but you say this other thing in the other part of the policy. So which one's right? As a human being, we might not be able to or even if we read the whole thing, we might have not even noticed the inconsistency. It does. So it helps, do things that in the past we wouldn't have even tried to do.
What advice or stories do you have around the cultural transformation, right? It's whether it's your CFO or whether it's your client, right? There's always going to be people in different spectrums.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's fear that it's going to take my job.
Yeah.
There's a fear that, I won't be needed, or, there's a guy on my team who came to me and said, I've saved 6 hours a day with the things I built. Like, what do I do now? And even though he'd been here quite a while, that was still like, I hope you're not going to downsize or pay me less. And of course that wasn't the case, but there is that fear. Like, how do you lead with that?
Well, you have to do it, head on. That was actually one of the first conversations that I had with our team at one of our all hands meetings, when I knew that AI was going to be part of our DNA and that we were going to be embracing it. And I wanted to make it perfectly clear that nobody was going to get replaced because of AI. We might not hire some people that we don't need anymore because we can now be more efficient and be more productive. But there was no way that I was going to look at, my team and say, okay, I don't need you guys anymore because now I can have AI do all that work. But I had to be realistic with them and myself that as AI becomes more available to, MSPs, some of them might be able to do things much more efficiently, much more cost effectively, and that's going to impact, our pricing models. And in fact, I'm on the advisory committee for the channel companies exchange conferences. And in August, the next exchange conference, we're going to have a breakout session on the new business models that AI might require, right? Because the thing that all of us, all humans who do any sort of work, have always based their compensation and their revenue generation on is the hours of labor that I put into something, right?
Right.
For the most part, it's like you get paid by the hour or you bill by the hour. Well, how does that work now in a world where you can do more in an hour than you could ever do before? And I've had these conversations with our law firm clients and our accounting firm clients, because now the CPAs can do so much more work so much faster, but yet they don't want to charge less, right? So they need to charge the same amount or more because they're trying to grow and they have to employ people. So I think we're going to start looking, we're going to start seeing more outcomes based type of fees, where a CPA firm, for example, might say, all right, I'll do this tax return for you for $5,000. Before, that $5,000 might have represented 20 hours of work, but now that $5,000 represents maybe 3 hours of work, but an AI doing the bulk of the heavy lifting. But still, it's worth $5,000 to get it right. So those kind of things is I think the next iteration in our industry of what AI is going to disrupt is how our business models work. And we haven't figured it out yet, but I suspect it's going to be a big part of what the future looks like for us.
Do you see more opportunity on changing your business model as an MSP? Because obviously that's usually based on some amount of we're not selling hours anymore, but we still, like you said, base it on what it takes to manage. Or do you see the opportunity on helping the clients transform their business? Where do you see the most opportunity?
I think for us, initially it's going to be looking at the clients that we work with, the things that we do for them, and trying to see, is there any way that we can what does this look like in a world where instead of charging per hour to do a project, for example, right? Like if I'm building a bunch of PCs, that's pretty easy. I know how much time it's going to take. I know what the rollout looks like. So I have a pretty good idea what that fee is going to look like. But what if I have a client that says, solve one of these pain points for me that costs me I have to hire 3 people to do, I'll go back to the expense report. I have 3 people whose jobs it is to review expense reports every day. That's it. That's all they do. And in my head, I'm like, okay, so based on their salaries and benefits, it's probably $300,000 a year that you're spending. If you could repurpose those people to other more valuable work, and I can automate that piece of it and save you $300,000, would it be worth $30,000 to you?
Right.
It has nothing to do with the hours that it's going to take me to solve that problem. It has more to do with the value of the work that I'm doing. And I see us more and more doing that sort of work where you're doing that sort of business model where even as an MSP, where your clients are paying you not because you're doing X amount, X number of hours of work. It's just you're solving a problem. You're letting them do what they need to do. You're keeping them safe. You're keeping their environment cyber secure, and you set a value for that. And you say, here's what this is worth to you for us to make sure that you don't lose any money this year. And they might agree with you, they may not, but I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to figure out sooner rather than later, because I think those native AI MSPs that I mentioned earlier, that's what they're going to be doing. They're not going to be basing it on how many hours per month they have to dedicate to a client. They're going to look at it and say, hey, it's all about compute. How many tokens am I going to use? How many, what's the AI backend going to cost me? And then I need to add X to make this profitable. And this is the way it's going to work. And those of us that don't embrace AI are going to be in a world of hurt.
How should we be thinking about that transition? Like, what should we be asking ourselves right now?
I think first and foremost, and this is a conversation that we have with all of our clients, and we have been having it for the last 2 years, which is you need to develop, after we have that, acceptable use policy, the next step in this is, what is your AI strategy look like? You have to ask that question, and then when you sit down and you carve out, in our case, it's 2 hours with the principles of your client organizations, and you say, let's talk about AI. Where do you see it helping? Where do you see it being the most valuable for you? And then you build a strategy around that. But it's an evolving strategy, right? Because it's moving really, really fast. And so in the case of that CPA that I mentioned earlier, part of the strategy for them is to move to this outcomes-based billing instead of hourly billing. How does that look like? What does that mean for her internal team? Those are all these questions that you have to get through, but you need to start by sitting down and saying, what is my AI strategy? And in terms of what that strategy looks like, it's going to be different for everybody. And a lot depends on a plumber's AI strategy is going to be way different than, a law firm's AI strategy. But there's still AI in the picture in some way, shape, or form that is going to make that plumber's life easier or more efficient, even if it's in the back end of just the way that they bill, the way that they produce their invoices or their quotes or their proposals. It's going to be beneficial to everybody. Yeah,
incredibly. I feel like I could go on all day, but in the interest of your time, Luis, this has been amazing. Thank you for being on MSP Mindset.
Well, thank you, Damien. It's been great. I've loved every minute of it.
If folks would like to reach you, connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
I'm on LinkedIn. All my contact information is up there. So just look me up on LinkedIn and reach out. Happy to talk about this or any other IT related stuff. Yeah, whatever you want to talk about. If you want to talk about sailing or football, you can see I'm a Dolphins fan. We'll talk about anything.
Love that. Yeah, make sure to take Luis up on that. And, we're all in this together with this rapid change.
Absolutely.
So, wonderful offer. Thank you, Luis.
Take care.